Scene script. Have you ever wondered how the Israel-Palestine conflict began? To understand the root of the conflict, we need to journey back to the late 19th and early 20th century, when Zionism, the Jewish national movement, emerged. Zionism, at its core, was a response to the widespread persecution of Jews in Europe, and a call for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the land of Israel, a place of significant biblical resonance. This notion gained international support with the Balfour Declaration of 1917. In this document, Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, expressed Britain's support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This, while seemingly a noble gesture, was not without its complications. At the time, Palestine was under British control, a period known as the British Mandate in Palestine, and was primarily populated by Arab Muslims and Christians. As news of the Balfour Declaration spread, Jews, hoping for a safe haven, began to immigrate in large numbers. Many were fleeing pogroms in Russia and the rise of Nazi Germany. However, the influx of Jewish immigrants led to tensions with the local Arab population, who felt their land and rights were being usurped. The tensions escalated, leading to sporadic violence and increasing pressure on the British authorities. The matter was eventually handed over to the United Nations, which in 1947 proposed a partition plan that would divide Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. However, the Arab states rejected the partition plan, and in 1948, upon the termination of the British Mandate, the Jewish Agency declared the establishment of the State of Israel. This unilateral declaration, viewed as a betrayal by the Palestinians, ignited a war between the neighboring Arab states and the newly declared Israel. The establishment of Israel in 1948 set the stage for the conflict we see today. 1948 marked a turning point in the history of this region. The year witnessed the eruption of the First Arab-Israeli War, a direct consequence of the declaration of the State of Israel. This war was not an isolated event, but was deeply rooted in the long-standing tensions between Jews and Arabs in Palestine. The war was an intense and complex confrontation involving Israel and a coalition of Arab states, including Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. The conflict was marked by a series of military engagements, political maneuvers, and ceasefires. The war's outcome significantly altered the map of the Middle East, leading to the establishment of a temporary boundary known as the Green Line under the 1949 Armistice Agreements. This boundary, however, was far from a resolution. It merely marked a pause in the conflict, a lull before the storm. The Green Line became a de facto border, a fragile and contested demarcation that was often violated, leading to ongoing clashes and skirmishes. The war also resulted in a significant demographic transformation. The displacement of Palestinian Arabs, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe, marked a dark chapter in the narrative of this conflict. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes during the war. The Nakba is remembered with sorrow and anger by Palestinians, a wound that has not healed, a memory that fuels the ongoing struggle. The 1948 war and the Nakba were key events that continue to shape the conflict. They are etched in collective memories, shaping national identities and fueling the cycle of violence and retaliation. The aftermath of the war set the stage for future conflicts and remains a critical point of contention in peace negotiations. This war and its aftermath are not mere historical events. They are living realities, constantly invoked and relived in the continuing struggle between Israel and Palestine. The Six-Day War of 1967 brought significant changes to the region. This war was an escalation of tension that had been simmering since the end of the First Arab-Israeli War in 1949. The Six-Day War was sparked by a series of diplomatic failures, military incidents, and political crises, with the main belligerents being Israel on one side and Egypt, Jordan, and Syria on the other. In the course of the war, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, sparking a conflict that would dramatically alter the landscape of the Middle East. Over the span of just 6 days, Israel managed to capture the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. This territorial expansion was significant, Not only did Israel triple its size, but it also gained control over significant religious and strategic locations, including Jerusalem's Old City, home to holy sites revered by Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. This was a major victory for Israel, but it also marked the beginning of a military occupation that remains a point of contention today. The displacement of Palestinians intensified as a result of the Six-Day War. Many Palestinians living in the newly occupied territories were forced to flee their homes, adding to the already high number of refugees from the First Arab-Israeli War. The war also had far-reaching political implications. It led to a shift in the dynamics of the conflict, with the Palestinian cause gaining more international recognition. The quest for Palestinian statehood became a central issue in the conflict, with the Palestinians seeking to establish their own nation in the territories occupied by Israel. In the aftermath of the Six-Day War, the United Nations passed Resolution 242, which called for Israel to withdraw from the territories it had seized during the war. However, this resolution has been the subject of much debate and interpretation, and has not been fully implemented to this day. The Six-Day War and its aftermath intensified the conflict and the quest for Palestinian statehood. The late 20th century saw the rise of a new player in the conflict, Hamas. Born out of the First Intifada, or uprising, in 1987, Hamas emerged as a militant offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Its charter called for the establishment of an Islamic state in Palestine and the destruction of Israel, marking a clear departure from the more secular politics of the Palestine Liberation Organization. Hamas quickly gained popularity among Palestinians for its welfare programs, but also for its hardline stance against Israel. The organization's growing influence was marked by a wave of suicide bombings and other acts of resistance against the Israeli occupation. This violence sparked a vicious cycle of attack and retaliation, further escalating the conflict. In response to these attacks, Israel imposed strict measures including curfews, restrictions on movement, and the controversial construction of the West Bank barrier. This separation wall, as it's often called, was purportedly built to prevent terrorist attacks. However, its construction on Palestinian land has been widely criticized and deemed illegal by the International Court of Justice. The Second Intifada, which erupted in 2000, saw an even greater level of violence. Hamas and other militant groups launched a series of suicide bombings, while Israel responded with large-scale military operations and targeted assassinations of Hamas leaders. In 2007, following a brief period of shared governance with Fatah, Hamas seized control of the Gaza Strip. Israel, in response, imposed a blockade on Gaza, severely restricting the movement of goods and people. This blockade, which is still in place today, has been condemned by human rights organizations for its devastating impact on the civilian population. Hamas's rise and the Intifadas marked a new violent phase in the conflict. The organization's continued control of Gaza and its commitment to armed resistance against Israel have made it a key player in the ongoing struggle, with the potential to shape the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Fast forward to today, the conflict continues with no end in sight. The recent resurgence of violence has seen a flurry of attacks from Hamas, met with forceful responses from Israel. The world watches with bated breath as peace initiatives stumble and falter. The whispers of a two-state solution seem to be drowned out by the cacophony of conflict. In the heart of it all, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza unfolds like a tragic play. The blockade, in place for years, has left the region in a dire state, with essentials like food, water, and medical aid becoming scarce commodities. The United Nations' attempts to deliver aid are often met with roadblocks, adding to the growing desperation. Meanwhile, Israeli settlements in the West Bank remain a contentious issue. These settlements, seen by many as an encroachment on Palestinian land, further fuel the tension between the two sides. The international community's stance on these settlements varies, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled web of conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict remains one of the world's most intractable issues,